We kind of wanted to start off talking about, well, on your website it says you were sort of a very early introduced to the instrument, and you know,
Yes.
playing before you were walking and things like that.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
We were kind of interested in learning about that beginning and what that was like and how you were introduced to music.
Sure. So, firstly, I started having interest in the drums from two sources originally. One was church. I grew up in at the time, it was considered a Pentecostal church, and it later morphed into a non-denominational church. Um, and then also there was I don't know if they played this later on, but on PBS there was a kid playing on pots and pans in his kitchen.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is like the video of this would eventually morph into an adult taking like a massive drum solo at some big concert. And I saw that as a child and I'm like, this is amazing. I want to do that. I want to hit things for a living. So, or I didn't think that consciously, of course, but it was just like, I want to do that. So in church, I used to see this drummer and he actually played traditional grip playing gospel music, which, in the 90s, I like cats had kind of stopped playing traditional grip unless you played jazz, right? So, or like some sort of like militaristic music. So, to see a guy playing gospel music and, at the time, you're listening to stuff like Hezekiah Walker and Fred Hammond and Commission to hear some playing that kind of stuff. And that was kind of the beginning of what people are considering gospel chops, which is really just the language of gospel drumming, part of it at least. To see someone playing that kind of stuff, but playing traditional grip was also interesting, which actually became somewhat of a foreshadowing of what I would be doing later. I like to think of
Right.
most of the events in my life as being a foreshadowing of what is to come. And I think that there's been a somewhat of a fortunate, for some people, they would say coincidence. I'd say a fortunate blessing of my life kind of going in that trajectory and having signs of that early on. If I do somewhat of a retrospective of my experience,
Mhm.
that's where it initially started. I mean, I tried playing piano and I played on my brother used to have a keyboard, my older brother. He used to have a keyboard and I broke it because I started like banging around on it because, I figured, okay, well, all instruments need to be striked in some way, shape, or form. So, or struck for that matter. So, yeah, like I guess by age 3 or 4, like my parents had bought this little Fisher Price drum that I still have. And then from there, they bought me this drum set, which is like set up like the old school kits. So there's like two toms on the side, the big bass drum, and a cymbal in the middle. And
Okay.
then from there, yeah, like, and I mean, again, foreshadowing. And so then they bought me this kit called Rock the World, which I'm sorry, Rock the World came before that. Then it was the Jam kit. And I busted the heads on all of those. And then at this point, I'm in grade school at like 5. And so I'm in kindergarten and I'm still playing, still trying to like emulate the drummer from church. And then by age 7, I think I was in second grade, there was a program that was started at my elementary school where they brought in someone to teach students how to play flute. You had the choice between flute or percussion.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I had already kind of started playing a little bit in church for like the children's choir, or at least like going to rehearsals and they would let me sit in. And
Yeah.
my mother at that point, who is, I mind you, also like she's a classical pianist, which helps
Yeah.
a lot. And so she's a classical pianist. My father was like a singer in a doo-wop group and an R&B group back in like the 70s. But then they also worked in the corporate world. So that also helps later on too. But anyways, so I was able to learn the flute. I sucked at that, so I stopped playing that. And then I was also taking percussion lessons. And through that program, they started teaching us basic music theory. Those of us that excelled in that program, and I believe I may have been the only one from the percussion group, we were then offered full scholarships to a private music school here in Philadelphia, where
Wow.
you basically paid 50 cents a lesson and you received um, you received theory lessons and also your percussion lessons, and they were like half hour half hour percussion lesson, hour theory lesson. And yeah, from age 7, that was when I started learning to I started studying classical music.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating how all those elements seem to sort of align almost sort of perfectly into putting you on that trajectory, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they became really hooked up in somewhat of an uncanny way, because
Right.
since I could play by ear already, once I'd learned to read, I would memorize things really quickly.
Uh,
So, we'd be playing a piece, and instead of me counting the bars, I just knew when I was supposed to come in. So I'd know the pieces. And that then changed once I started playing in like larger format orchestras, because, you know, it like when you're learning classical music and playing jazz at the same time, for me, the focus in both was really complex because it's two totally different disciplines, but still kind of coming from the same place. I'll explain that later. But yeah, I mean, the early foundational skills that were given to me definitely helped later on, and I didn't notice it until actually now. I've never thought about it, but
Yeah.
they've been really helpful. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
and so we read that roughly around the age of 13, you had already started playing more or less professionally. You were on the scene. What is it like sort of entering at such a young age and kind of handling that? Was it better, worse, or how did you think about it?
It was fun. I mean, that was number one. Like, because the way that it even happened, like I was at the time I was going to I don't know how familiar you are with the Philadelphia education scene, because it's a scene, but
Mhm.
there was a place called the Kimmel Center, which is our like Lincoln Center, if you will. And what ends up happening is they had an education program, and I was the first generation of that education program. And I had a teacher named Mark Johnson. He started teaching us, honestly, like the basics of big band playing. We played in a large ensemble, and we were playing, like Groove Merchant from Buddy Rich's band, or, Molten Swing. Like, we were playing proper big band repertoire, and as we got older, the music became more and more complex, and he broke those bands apart and then created a high school group and a middle school group. I was very fortunate and blessed to be in both, even though I was in middle school, and I was the only middle schooler in the high school group. So, um, yeah, I actually learned to read charts from him and how to interpret charts from him. Like what a big band setup is as a drummer, what my role is in the rhythm section as a drummer.
Yeah.
And so then also simultaneously while that's happening, I'm in the house and I'm practicing ridiculous amounts of time a day. I can't lie. I mean, I'd come home from school at 3 o'clock. I'd be at home practicing instantly at maybe about 4:30. I'd shed for like an hour, go do my homework, and then I'd probably be up until like 1 or 2 on my practice pad, just like learning marching band snare drum solos, and trying to like play at 250 BPM, and playing single stroke rolls at warp speed. And I was just I wanted to have facility, because prior to all of this stuff, and I'm going to get into the scene part, I I had met a lot of drummers in the scene,
Mm.
because my neighborhood, fortunately, is kind of like an artistic haven, if you will. Like, some of us call this the arts district, because we have like I have a metals craftsman that lives across the street from me now, and he builds some of the most beautiful tattoo machines you'll ever see.
Mhm.
And he built a lot of tattoo machines for some of the greatest tattoo artists. So it's like it's a thing, like there's a great trumpet player who also does like some experimental music. There's a bunch of graphic artists that live around the neighborhood as well. I mean,
It's in the
it's
air.
pretty insane. It's in the air. So
Yeah.
with that said, I had met a bunch of guys and women that were in the music industry, and they would give me tapes when I was younger. So like I had, best swing drum solos, volume 1 at the age of 11. So like I had been checking out Buddy Rich and Barrett Deems and Elvin Jones and all of those people already. And then my father also was playing jazz in the house. My mother and father were playing jazz in the house. So I knew Kind of Blue when I was like 10. Like that was my album. I hated jazz, but I knew that that was my dad's music. So I wanted to dig it. Yeah. So anyways, so then since I knew some of these drummers, they would take me and my father and my mother to like these events that would be happening around town. So there was a jazz series behind my house, actually, which is still in existence to this day. It's happened since like 2003, maybe earlier. And all of the local jazz musicians of Philadelphia, which at the time happened to be people like Charles Fambro and John Blake and like Tia Fuller would come in, and the great pianist George Burton would be playing. Orrin Evans would be playing, also foreshadowing because I didn't realize I was going to play with him at some point. But like I would see those people and I'd go up and talk to them and say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Justin." And then through the Kimmel Center, we would get free tickets to concerts. So like Danilo Perez was mentoring our band by the time, like, and I mind you, I'm like 13 or 12 at the time. Danilo was the artistic director of the Kimmel Center. So he was coming in and doing master classes with us. We had James Moody that came in. We had Bootsy Barnes, who's a great Philadelphia saxophonist, but also very widely known. He was mentoring us. I met Brian Blade when I was around that age. The Fellowship came and played at the Kimmel Center. We got free tickets. Met Herlin Riley. Met Terrion Gully, because Christian McBride is like we call each other cousins or like family members. Like his mom and my mother grew up together. So like I've known Christian since I was a kid, sort of. Like I guess I met him around 13, 14. So anyways, I'm meeting all of these people, and then this bass player at the time, who I didn't know, he's also a vintage menswear collector and expert. His name is Jamaluddin Takuma, who was also the bassist in Ornette Coleman's band Primetime. Wow. So he's delivering a garment across the street from my house to a client, and he heard me playing, and so I'm in here doing my normal practice, actually ironically enough sitting in this spot, and next thing you know, I'm sitting there practicing, and he knocks on the door and rings the doorbell. My parents go to the door because they see some strange man, like, semi-dancing on the porch. He asks them, "Who is that? What is happening?" And then they told him, "Yeah, that's our son." Oh, really? And, I've kind of been 6 foot all my life at least, but like, I think I was maybe about 5'7" or something like that back then. So I come out and he's looking like, there's no way this kid just played all of that stuff. And so he came in and he's like, "Man, can you swing?" And then I started playing like my version of swing back then. And then he's like, "Man, can you play some funk?" And I started playing some stuff. And he's like, he looked at my parents. "I have a gig that I'm doing every week at this new club called Cafe Harlem in Yaden, Pennsylvania, which is like 10 minutes away from my house. Can he do the gig?" So I was making more money than all of my friends at 13. So it's like, and like they used to advertise like 13-year-old Justin Faulkner playing drums. And like, I've had my birthday party that year, my 14th birthday party there. And I met all of the cats in Philly through this, like great drummer Webb Thomas, and then some really great actors and actresses used to come through, used to come through, and they'd have private parties at this place. And so we were the band for the place. Mm-hmm. So whenever they'd have, like a fashion event, we'd do it. We'd be the band. So yeah, I mean, I met a lot of people through Jamaluddin, and actually ended up doing an album with Ornette Coleman as a result of that with him during like the last portion of Ornette's Mr. Coleman's life. And so, yeah, I mean, literally everything in my life has been like a foreshadowing of what was to come. Yeah. It's kind of wild. But yeah, so that's, and playing in the scene then, I was getting to hang out with all of the cats. So I was hyped. Like I got to see Mickey Roker play like with regularity. He was the house drummer at Ortlieb's Jazz House, so my thing the thing for me is that I was really grateful to have mentors, and I was fortunate to realize that then, like, wow, this is maybe not normal. And I'm really excited because like one year playing with Jamaluddin, the next year I met Orrin Evans.
Mm-hmm.
which changed everything. Because, I mean, Jamaluddin set my foundation, and Orrin was like, "Oh, you want to do this? Okay, great." And like, I started playing in New York at 15 with Orrin,
Wow.
and then I joined the Mingus band around that time as well. So it's a lot. Anyways, I answered your question and said a bunch of other stuff. My bad.
No.
Perfect, man. I was just gonna ask, like, so at that age, 13, were you aware, like, just how legendary the music you were playing was, I guess, and like that connection with it?
Absolutely. My parents are like borderline historians in a lot of things. Like, they were alive during the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were born in what, let me see. My mother was like, my parents were born in the 50s. So like they were born the beginning of like one of my favorite periods of jazz history.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like they were there from a spiritual perspective, and also physically they were there. They may not have understood what was happening, but just like all of our upbringings, it informs your adulthood in some way, shape, or form. So my father and mother were very adamant about, me growing up understanding what quote unquote good music sounds like. I was listening to Bobby Hutcherson when I was a kid. I was listening to Horace Silver when I was a child. Like, my father was a huge Lee Morgan fan. My mother was a huge fan of like a lot of the older R&B groups from the Sound of Philadelphia, and like, she was into the Platters, she was into the Shy-Lights, she was into all of these groups that a lot of my friends still to this day don't even know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I figured that this, like, at the time, I'm figuring to myself, this is old people music, but there's something about this that I like. But I don't really want to play that. Like, that was my first thought process. And then when I started playing jazz, or at least trying to take it seriously, it was like, wait, hold on. There's something different about this, because at the time I was playing gospel music and really trying to focus on maybe playing R&B. And I just realized that there was just something special about being able to create in that way with these people based on a language that we all learn individually and then developed collectively.
Yeah.
That's the hindsight version of what I did realize then, though. I mean, it's like to hear Orrin Evans play with, Nasheet Waits, J.D. Allen, Stacey Dillard, and Eric Revis.
Yeah.
Not knowing that like these gentlemen would become, like my big brothers and mentors, to see Orrin Evans playing with Terry Lynn Carrington and Kate Shutt, and then Orrin and Kate introducing me to Terry Lynn. Like, there had to be something significant about these moments for me then, like I had to, like, I would not have taken advantage and like jumped at the opportunity the way that I did if I didn't understand that I don't know why this is special, but this is special.
Yeah.
And all of those people, they changed my life. They changed the way that I think, they changed the way that I played. I mean, they changed the way that I dressed, actually. Some of them, so like the influence of Tim Warfield and like the influence of Jamaluddin and several other people, like my entire existence changed as a result of that time in that period of my life.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the practicing, because you had mentioned, you'd get home, you'd play an hour and then do some homework and then just play all the way till 1 or 2 in the morning. That, I guess, almost sort of obsessive nature with the music, was that just always there, or was it sort of egged on by the fact that you were in such a rich environment, or were you always sort of interested in just getting really good at developing yourself and whatnot? Or,
well, you got to understand something. Like, when you go to a school of like a bunch of beasts on the instrument, you have to make sure that you are consistently top dog in your school. That was a huge motivation. I can't lie about that. I mean, there's a drummer named Bernard Lambert, Trey Lambert. There's a great keyboard player, CJ Branch. Like, these were my boy Joe Connor, my boy for Sean Thompson. Like these are guys that I grew up with who were, I loved them to death, but like I needed to come out on top. So like they were my friends, but like I needed to make sure that, whatever percussion parts I wanted to play, I
Mhm.
was section leader because I was the most equipped musician. And as a result, I get to choose what I want to play. Like that was a part of my thought process. But also, too, I realized in certain aspects of my life at the time, I was a leader or considered a leader by some of my teachers. And I realized that in order for me to come in and play the music well, I needed to know the tunes.
Hmm.
Like I needed to be able to understand what should be played on all of this stuff. So I would go on like halleonard.com and like because part of my practice is listening. And I don't believe I mentioned that. Part of my practice is listening and researching. I'd go on halleonard.com, figure out ways of buying the arrangement so that I could get the MP3 so I could learn the song.
Hmm.
If I or I'd buy the score and have it digitally on my or like get the PDF or I'd have it sent to the house. And I'd learn people's music. Like I'll never forget learning a version of Boplicity that I believe Mike Tamaro wrote. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me go check out the original one. I went to go my father had Birth of the Cool. I listened to Boplicity inside out. And I'm like, okay, this is a little different. And I would compare the recordings to figure out, okay, well, how can I add the original pieces of this into this other arrangement? Because I started seeing the reaction of older musicians when I play classic things from classic albums.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Like if
exactly.
like I mean that's the language. Like that's how
Mhm.
we're communicating with each other. That's the kindred spirit, a part of it at least. And I think back then I was predominantly playing with older people anyways. So that was the other thing. I knew I had to rise to the occasion because I knew I was in a special place. Older people trusted me with the drum chair and I'm like, man, I can't mess this up. Whatever I do, I can't suck on this next gig. Because I mean, I was playing Tia Fuller's music and I'm thinking like 15, 16. I'm playing
Yeah.
Tia Fuller's music, which is really hard. I'm playing Orrin's music, which is really hard. Like he had a blues with a bar three as the 12th bar, and I'm just like, dude, I'm like, when you're in it, and like Orrin plays open, and we're playing free, so we're still playing the form of the blues, but like that bar of three, I'd always get lost.
Yeah.
And then listening to Ralph Peterson playing on Orrin's albums, or Orrin playing on Ralph's album, or listening to, Brian Blade playing with Joshua Redman, like I wanted to get to that. But then I also knew,
Mhm.
well, they listen to these older people. So also I got to figure that out too. And, like my practice was consisted of that, just trying to honestly not suck. Like I never wanted to go into any of these situations with the adults that trusted me with the drum chair and disappoint them and potentially mess this up for any other young person that comes along.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I felt like there was a greater responsibility and I needed to kill it every time I sat behind the kid.
Just gonna say, yeah, this next question sort of ties into what you were saying about, I guess not emulating, the drummers that you heard on these records, but sort of being at their level, being able to play at their level. When you joined Branford's group, um, you were obviously replacing the legendary Jeff Tain Watts. And at such a young age, how do you approach, playing in that group, playing to his level, but sort of, still having your own sound, your own voice, and giving your personality to the music, I guess.
Mm. So three things. One, I can't really say that I replaced Tane. I think that the language on that has to be a little more uh um honestly it has to be it has to have a bit more honor to it. I actually had the privilege of assuming the chair once he chose to uh, work on his own projects.
Mm.
You know, for me, it's like that drum chair it's only been held by a few people,
Yeah,
you know, in history. And for me, that was the first jazz concert I had ever seen
Oh,
in a large venue.
Wow.
I went to a children's concert of them playing when I was in fifth grade.
Wow.
And I saw Jeff Tain Watts, Joey Calderazzo, and Eric Reeves playing Spider-Man. And that's part of how I knew that's what I wanted to do for a living. I'm like, if Spider-Man can sound like this, I need to, yeah, I maybe need to reconsider what I'm doing. And so, I mean, man, Tain, if he has not gone down in history for this, he will definitely go down in history as one of the greatest jazz drummers of all time,
yeah,
period.
exactly.
And so with that said, you know, I had the privilege of, you know, being the next drummer in the drum chair, you know, not necessarily replacing him. And so secondly, it was terrifying. uh, you know, let me say this. Branford was incredibly, well, actually all of the guys in the band, including our sound engineer and road manager, like it's a family, you know, and they knew that I was the little brother coming into the family. And Branford heard something, you know, whatever that looks like, you know, whatever that sounded like. I don't know how, at the time, I didn't know how he heard anything because I felt like all of the odds were stacked against me when he did hear me for the first time when I met him with my high school band. But you know, I mean, I'm really big on apprenticeship, and being in that band has been the greatest apprenticeship of a lifetime. You know, and the thing is, I wouldn't have been able to get there had it not been for the people that came before. So, like, you know, I had the preparation of playing with, you know, Boris Kozlov and Orrin, or Boris Kozlov and Dave Kikowski in the Mingus Band rhythm section,
Yeah,
with like Ryan Kaiser, Sean Jones, and Lou Soloff in the trumpet section. You know, like Mark Gross, Jaleel Shaw, Craig Handy, Abraham Burton, and Ronnie Cuber in the saxophone section. Like it was nut. Like Robin Eubanks, Clark Gayton, and what was the gentleman's name? Earl McIntyre on trombone. Like I mean, the sections were nuts. So like having that experience, you know, subbing in Sean Jones' band, I think one or two times at that time, you know, just playing with a bunch of people prior and playing in Philly. I think what it did was like, it made me like, I had a little bit of a fright just in terms of, I got to step up, but I was never scared to step up. You know, my thought process every night was, I don't know what's going to come out, but we're going to party. This is going to be cool. Somehow I know I have a lot to learn. I have a ton to learn. I'm going to have to learn how to really play music, because the drum stuff, yeah, I can do that. But like, I now need to learn to be a musician. And one of the most significant moments of my life is when Branford and the guys basically said, okay, great, we love you. Here's how to actually play this stuff. And they gave me, like, I mean, 100 gigabytes worth of music.
Wow.
Like they say, give me your hard drive. Every single person in the band, give me your hard drive. And they gave me the stuff that they heard, or better yet, they gave me albums to address the things that were lacking in my musicianship. And the thing that I appreciate so much is that they didn't try to train me for that band. They wanted me to become a better musician so that my career would actually benefit from it rather than just them. And that happened twice, because as I got older, I think I was maybe 5 or 6 years in, they had another talk with me, and they were like, man, you have figured out a lot of stuff on the surface and you will work for the rest of your life. You'll be fine. Do you want to go deeper?
Yeah.
They were like, man, you haven't gone into the deep. And we can hear it. You know, like, are you willing to go deeper into these albums and learn the nuance of song architecture? Are you willing to understand what an arc really is in a song and how you get there? Are you willing to understand the language of each period and sound of this music from the earliest pieces of it to now? Like, are you willing to do that research? And if you're not, we will still love you. Their exact words. We will
Mhm.
still love you. Our love for you has nothing to do with you. We love you. That's our choice. But you have an opportunity to go deep and learn truly how beautiful this music is. And you have the opportunity to become a great musician if you're willing to do the deep work. And that's what these last 11 years have been.
Yeah.
The deep work. Like, I mean, we've done 3 albums together, countless other projects, and, thousands of shows at this point. Probably not thousands. Oh, but maybe it is actually. Hold on. Yeah, actually, it might be. Um, I thank God every day that I have the opportunity to play this music, because I mean, jazz is it's just. I mean, I'm able to express myself in a way that goes beyond what I'm capable of communicating verbally, and being with these gentlemen, it helped me express myself and really I mean, we've developed a different language. Like, we've developed a language inside of a language, like a dialect inside of a, like, already established vernacular. So, when we play together, we can go like 6 months without playing together, and we come back and it's like, there's some cobwebs, but no, we're in there, and it's a beautiful thing, and I believe that those skills have then also transcended that bandstand and gone into other projects that we've done together, and then influenced how we play with other people as well outside of this band.
Mhm.
But I had to push, to put it simply. Like, I had to hustle. Like, I had no chances to be, and they gave me a lot of chances to mess up, a lot of chances to, like, grow.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I was a kid when I joined the band. I was 17.
Yeah, exactly.
So they gave me a chance to grow up musically and socially,
Yeah.
but then also, they gave me the space to develop, because I found myself by having phases of listening to other people,
Mhm.
because I can never play like Ray Haynes. I will never play like Elvin. I will never play like Tony. I will never play like any of these people. But deep study of those people allowed me to apply what I've learned to the music that I'm playing when I hear that it's necessary. It gave me a sound vocabulary over being a caricature or lick transcription, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that sort of second sitting down and like asking you, hey, would you like to go even deeper? Could you maybe just detail a little bit more, like what exactly do they mean by that, and like what kind of things did you do to actually go deeper, as it were?
At the time, I became the music director of my church, and I was really focused on that. And to be honest, I was just like spreading myself way too thin. Like, I was trying to double down on, like, really understanding my role as a drummer in gospel music, but then I kind of just allowed everything else to kind of, I don't want to say fall by the wayside, but it just wasn't it. I wasn't playing to my potential,
Yeah.
and essentially what they were saying is, dude, yeah, you can clearly play jazz. You're like, yes, you can play, and you can play the drums, because that's a thing that a lot of people um, have kind of gotten to a place where there's like a ridiculously high level of proficiency on the instrument.
Mhm.
But it's like, are you playing the vocabulary historically of this music, whatever it is? And for me, like, there's a stylistic difference between drumming in, Indian classical music and jazz,
Hmm.
right? But like, if I have incredible technique on an instrument, it all just becomes notes without the sound characteristics of that particular music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like for me, it's kind of like me speaking Spanish without the accent. I'm pretty sure every person that speaks Spanish would be a little perturbed with like my disregard for the accent and the inflections and the beauty of the language that
Mhm.
truly allows a person who speaks it fluently to understand what you're saying. You know, because think about people who, like, I'm looking at a sentence right now and it says where the music began, right? So if I understand how that's pronounced and I understand the like subject verb agreement and all of this stuff, right? And I say, okay, music the been where began where. Most people that speak English would ask me, "What are you saying?" You know, or they would be able to decipher that. Now, what happens when like I have a deeper understanding and I start saying, you know, the place music started? I'm saying the same thing, but now you have a little bit more context.
Yeah.
You can't explain a sentence unless you understand the vocabulary. Like you can't explain something unless you have a deeper knowledge of that thing. And what ended up happening for me at that time was I just I could just play jazz. I didn't really know jazz.
Mm.
You know, I didn't really have a vocabulary. I just could play the drums. And so I could swing groove wise enough for it to work.
Hmm.
But like there were moments when it would just turn into like a drum symphony. And to most people, okay, yeah, that may sound good, but like to them, they're like, yo, man, that's great. But we aspire to a higher level of playing. We aspire to a higher way of addressing this music. You need to come on this ride with us. And for me, it was just, it meant that I had to listen to Tony Williams and understand why he played what he played after Wayne stopped playing on the solo. It's
Yeah.
like what was actually happening. And one thing that we know if you listen to Tony Williams is that Tony would complete people's phrases. You know, if you think about a sentence, Tony would put the punctuation at the end of the sentence.
Hmm.
You know, so sometimes Wayne would play something and Tony would put a comma instead of there actually being a period completing that particular phrase. And the thing is that when you're playing music, there's dialogue happening. And having like listened to, for example, what Elvin plays on Deluge, right? I can't hear that song without Elvin playing. Like, I mean, that is a part of the song now, but that's
Yeah.
also dialogue. And so that's also maybe like, I mean, maybe that's also through composing, or maybe that's just him creating a counterline, whatever it is. Like sitting down and really figuring out, like, what is happening here?
Hmm.
And is this applicable to the way that I'm going to approach playing music? And if it's not, too bad. I'm going to sit here and listen to this for like the next 5 or 6 months. And I'm going to try to embody everything in this album or in this song. Hopefully, my imagination will eventually take this information that I've now embodied, and then there will be a manifestation of this on stage with the people that I'm playing with.
Yeah.
Then, once it manifests on stage, once I put an idea out there, let's dance with this. Oh, you played that? Okay, cool. Like let's twist it. Like I mean, there's one time I played the drum part to Jimi Hendrix Machine Gun. Everybody in the band knew it. So we're playing Eric Revis's tune, I think Dance of the Nalaste. And the next thing you know, I one of the parts of the tune is bang, 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 bang. And so I actually played boom, 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 boom. And everybody on the band says, oh, and so they started playing that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
to have a deep understanding of albums and then be able to allow your imagination to implement that anywhere while still living in the sound, like the historical perspective of the sound, but then being yourself. I mean, I know it sounds like it's all over the place, but it's a living thing. You
Mm.
know, like it makes the music something that can't necessarily be, I don't know how to say this. Like, I mean, it doesn't put the music in a box. It allows it to be living, you know. So regardless of where it goes, it still pays respect to the history. It still allows you to implement whatever it is that you're feeling or hearing, and then additionally, it allows you to communicate with the family on stage.
Mhm.
You know, because I mean, every time we play, it's family meeting. You know, like we're sitting down having Thanksgiving dinner, basically. You know, so
Wow.
it's not really about, oh, this is my solo, this is my solo. It's
Yeah.
more so like, oh man, did you see that? Did you see the game today? That's what the conversation is on stage. And I think identifying that in all of the albums that exist, or identifying that that may not happen on all of the albums, like just analyzing but allowing embodiment to happen are, I mean, those are the characteristics and the things that helped me in what I consider the deep study. And now, you know, when we're playing together, and also, by the way, these are all like adults who still search on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, Branford will send an album to the group text in a matter of seconds. Hey, guys, check out this Hindemith, or like, check out this Hindemith, excuse me, or check out this, you know, this Wagner. Eric will send me something from like, you know, like thrash death metal band that also has like an R&B neo soul tinge to it. You know, like Joey will then say, "Yo, guys, I've been checking out this Keith Jarrett stuff," or like, "I've been checking out, you know, the Chopin etudes, but check out this person playing it." You know,
Mhm.
Robbie, our sound engineer, will send, "Hey guys, you know, I've been checking out some Free. Check this out," and then he'll send us a recording of the band Free. Rod, our road manager, will say, "Yo, guys, okay, so check this out. I've been listening to David S. Ware. Check this music out." And then for me, you know, I'll like, I'm kind of an old school dude. Like recently, I sent the cats this song, "Tis Autumn," and Nat King Cole sings the tune, and it's a beautiful tune that I actually learned from my mother. You
Mm.
know, she was like, "Yeah, Justin, you ever heard "Tis Autumn?" Because there's a version of it in the TV show Sanford and Son. And when I heard them singing it, I'm like, "Oh wow, that melody is bad." And so then I looked it up, and the version that I found was Nat King Cole. You know, like we're all searching constantly, and I think that is everything that I was trying to say can actually be summed up into the idea of we're searching. You know, no matter how much we've developed, we play the songs that we play, but we're searching.
Mm.
Mhm. That's a beautiful way to put it, man. It really is.
I mean, it's what it is. Like, you see, I tried to explain it, and it's just, you know, I think about these things, but I tend to just do the work.
Mhm.
Mm.
You know, like when it comes to the idea of like, I mean, recently I started teaching, so teaching more than I did in the past. So I've had to conceptualize these things, or you know, put them into words that are, you know, available to me when I need to effectively communicate my point of view.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, it's like a lot of this is about exploration and being honest and true to the history of this stuff. You know, I know a lot of people are saying that jazz is, you know, this creative expression, and I'm like, yeah, no, I agree. But don't we tend to like listening to people who understand the English language in a way where they're able to create beauty with words.
Yeah.
I mean, they've studied great writers, you know, they've studied great people, and then when they receive this information, you know, from, you know, someone reading Tolstoy or whoever, it's like then they sat down and said, okay, huh, these are my ideas that I now have, but the influence of those other people will always be there.
Mm.
And I think that no matter how great you become, it's great to have references. You know, like I'm not ever mad at that. I think it's beautiful, and I'm 29, so you know, perhaps I have a long way to go before I truly understand what that looks like. But for right now, you know, Baby Dodds is still teaching me quite a bit. So I don't think I've gone past or beyond his playing as of
Yeah.
yet, you know.
Yeah, we wanted to touch on a little bit of your philanthropic work as well, because we heard that you were doing a lot of
Oh,
interesting things in Philadelphia from an entrepreneurial perspective and sort of supporting the community with that music festival and stuff. Do you mind sort
Right,
of
right.
going over that a little bit? Because I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is two of my cousins were murdered. I think maybe like 4 years apart or 5 years apart or something like that. And gun violence in Philadelphia has gotten really bad in the last several years. And so my mother was like, something, music kept you and a lot of my friends out of the street, out of like hanging out and getting caught up in other things that we maybe don't need to do or didn't need to do back then. And, I just remembered my mother and I would always talk about the experiences, some of which I had already explained earlier. It's like the idea of being able to go see Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra for free. The idea of, seeing the Brian Blade Fellowship play live, seeing Wayne Shorter's band play live, seeing Ornette Coleman's band play live, seeing, Jamaluddin's band with David Murray, Hamiet Blewett, and Lee Pearson play at the Five Spot, going to Ortlieb's. Like all of these experiences helped to cultivate the life that I have and the taste level that I believe that I have. And these experiences helped make me who I am. So we figured to ourselves that we have to now recreate that because a lot of those programs that were in existence when I was growing up have now ceased to exist. They're no longer there. And if they are, they've changed a little bit. So my mother, my brother, and I, we figured let's put on. Well, my mother started this actually. She said, I'm going to do a music festival. I'm like, Mom, no offense, but I play a lot of them, and you don't know anything about doing a music festival. She said, I know. I'm going to figure it out. And now we're at number 6. And so, my mother's a trailblazer. Multiple degrees. She's a visionary in so many ways, and so she's been the head of the management company that we own for my entire career. Early on, it was just her. Now, we have people that work under us and we help launch other people's careers and give, we do some consultant work and help artists establish themselves in the industry and also just like help them establish their voice, doing these things that I've talked about, the deep study, if you will. So, yeah, our first festival was wild because, like early on when I first joined Branford's band, shortly after I also joined Kurt Rosenwinkel's band and Jackie Terrason's trio. And as a result of that, Jackie Terrason was actually our first headliner for the festival, which was the bomb. So it was me, Jackie Terrason, and Ben Williams playing. And it was great. And we had our church choir sing. And what we also did that year was, kids were in the park playing around. We had face painting and all of the stuff because it's a community event. Mm-hmm. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that throughout the year, we collect instruments to give to kids and we give them to them with no strings attached. Because the reality is that one of the greatest things my mother could have ever done for me was give me the space to explore the instrument. I fell in love with the instrument before I learned how to read music for it. So it was never reading music can be somewhat of a tedious process at first, as you know, but there was never a deep aversion to the idea of practicing. Like I loved practicing. I still do. We're sitting here with my drums right here. I love practicing. That's not a problem. And it's never been a problem, but that came from the initial love that I had for the instrument. Right. So we want young people to develop a love for the instrument and a love for music. So we work with these 2 other programs, one being the Clef Club. And then also, if you don't necessarily want to study at the Clef Club, we will, if we have the funding, we will pay for you to have, we'll pay for like a year's worth of lessons as well. And the goal is to just have students playing, like this thing, like music saves lives. I know so many people that have said, if it weren't for music, who knows what I would be doing. And I think about, my life. Like, I have friends, unfortunately, that are no longer here due to the environment you know, that they grew up in. And to be honest with you, man, I've lived in so many different kinds of neighborhoods. Like, I've lived in what people consider the hood. I've lived in ritzy neighborhoods.
Mhm.
Misguided behavior can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like when there's idle time and no focus, it's possible anywhere. So to give that opportunity to young people to, number one, start an instrument. There has been, matter of fact, there's a great podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson, Eric Whitaker, and a neuroscientist. I forget her name. And there's another gentleman on the podcast, and they talk about the merits that music presents when it comes to early cognitive development, and it's incredible. And the reality is that, like, most people who played instruments ended up excelling in school, even if they didn't continue their studies. And so for us, giving that opportunity to parents who may not understand that that's a possibility, because I have a lot of friends who started playing with me, and their parents instantly, as soon as they graduated, their parents told them, you need to go to college, you need to go get a job. My mother said, you have had a job for quite some time. I just want you to go to college. And I didn't want to. But I went to Berklee College of Music, and I spent a bit of time there and studied with great people, studied with Ralph Peterson, Darren Barrett, and Terry Lynn Carrington. It changed everything for me. But, I think that music is a track for young people to potentially get out of their situations if they're in a bad neighborhood, or if they're dealing with some stuff that is kind of beyond their control. Music is an outlet. There were days when I was so frustrated with school or with whatever, like my high school girlfriends or whatever, like young troubles that we may have or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, music was an outlet for me to express things that I couldn't really talk to people about or didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just music has multiple purposes, and I think providing access to that for young people is the least that I can do, because the way that music has taken care of me and the way that the music community has taken care of me, it would be irresponsible of me and my family for us to not do the same things. Like, there's a great saying, one who learns to fly must teach flight. And I also have added, one that has learned to fly must teach flight. And also, if you can't afford the equipment, provide it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are some wonderful thoughts, and it's really amazing work that you're doing there. And I think that it's going to improve so many lives, and it's just
man. Thank you for everything you do. It's so important.
I mean, honestly, my family, they're just great people, and people don't understand that. Like, my neighborhood was so supportive. Like, I could practice from, like, on the weekends, I could practice from 12 to about 9 at night. They didn't care. Like, people used to sit on our porch and listen to me practice, and listen to my younger brother practice. Like, now people will come into the neighborhood and they're saying, "Hey, Justin, I haven't heard you play lately, man. What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, man, I've been primarily teaching, or I just whatever." Like, I mean, people are looking for that when they now walk down my block. So my community has been so supportive of us and all that we've done. My community gave some of the first donations to the festival. Like, we've played music on our porch. So for me, it's always been, even when I was younger, like, I've always loved education. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved the idea that I can pass off a saying that, Jack DeJohnette maybe told me, or like, I can pass off some information that I received from Charles Fambro's mouth directly. Like, I mean, I can share the history of the Art Blakey symbol that I have sitting somewhere in here. Like, I use it often, so it's not just collecting dust, trust me. But it's like to share these things with people. Jazz is an oral tradition, like that's the other aspect of it that a lot of people don't necessarily continue. It's like we can learn all of the theory in the world. How do you know who Elvin Jones's favorite drummer was when he was younger? By his stories. Like, you learn what Elvin Jones likes from him. There's interviews, there's videos, like that. There's autobiographies of these people. Like, I mean, you have to also go there to the oral tradition. And I think, figuring out a way to pass this stuff down, because I was incredibly blessed to receive it in the first place. I mean, that's my job. Like, music is great. I love what I do, but if I'm not giving back and providing something for my community, I mean, what am I getting these resources for in the first place? I can't use all of this stuff myself. This information didn't belong to me. The resources don't belong to my mother and my brother and I. So yeah, our job is to redistribute the resources that people give it, whether it be financial or intellectual.
Yeah, no, great. We've kind of come up on the hour, and we don't want to hold you too long, but
No worries. I appreciate you guys.
maybe as like a final wrap up, like what are your sort of plans right now and for the future? Like, what have you been up to, and what can we maybe expect to see from you in the future? Any projects?
Yeah. So I was very blessed and fortunate to play some tunes on Chadwick Boseman's last movie that's coming out on Netflix in December, called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Branford was the film score and wrote all the music. So I was really blessed to share the drum chair with Shannon Powell and Harlan Riley for that. Let's see. I am soon releasing my which will probably end up being a single. It's a piece that I'm writing for the Jazz Coalition. I received the grant this year for that, and thank you to them once again. I am going to actually open my private studio back up. So I'm now accepting students again for my own private studio, and that I teach all instruments. Not that I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but I'm a musician. So, my goal is to help everyone figure out what they want to do, and then put them on the right track to achieving that thing, or those things, or that lifestyle and purpose-driven career that they have, that they want to have. And lastly, I'm going to remain happy. That's very important for me. And, trying to share and spread that as much as possible, via social media, learning how to utilize that for the greater good, if you will. So yeah, right now I'm just going to stay as busy, productive, but happy as I possibly can be, and release those things, and, open up my private studio. That's going to be great because I love teaching.
Yeah.
My teaching, my classes are less talking these days, so it won't be this, but we sit down and we navigate things, and I'm willing to actually navigate what a career may look like for any of the students that have studied with me. So
yeah, great. I mean,
and also we're gonna do some Christmas stuff for our festival as well. There's a few live streams that are coming out that we created, and also, wow, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I'm sorry about that. So also a quartet that I put together, consisting of me, obviously, a great pianist from Philadelphia, Neil Pogorski, and bassist Stanley Rufinoff, and great saxophonist Tim Warfield. We did a few tunes at the WRTI studio for Jazz Bridge, so that'll be coming out in January as well. So look out for that.
Great. Yeah, we'll make sure to check all of that out as it comes out in the coming months.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. This has been a ball.
No,
Thank you so much.
It's been really great hearing your stories, and just so admirable, like the work that you're doing. It's really important, I think. So yeah.
I'm just grateful to be here to do it, and to exist and thrive with everyone else. Like, my life is about service. So if I'm serving, I'm happy.
Well, thank you, and have a wonderful day. And again, thanks so much for appearing on the podcast. Yeah.
Yes, thank
No
you,
worries.
man.
Thank you for having me. Cheers. Have a
Cheers.
good one.